The next talk will also be an industry talk by Arthrex, which is a US medical device company founded in Munich, Germany in 1981 and headquartered in Naples, Florida. Arthrex develops, produces, and markets medical technology, instruments, and devices. Product range includes more than 13,500 products for arthroscopy, reconstruction, instruments, and implants for sports medicine and traumatology, joint prosthetics, as well as products for orthobiology, aesthetic medicine, and medical imaging. We are excited to welcome Jonathan Knopf, Principal Designer, Global User Experience, and Augmented Reality at Arthrex.
Thank you so much. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
Great. All right. Wow, there were some really great talks today. It was nice to hear about some really concerted efforts into innovation and how to bring those innovations forward. So I just want everybody to know that I'm taking a different scope and view of this. I'm a UX designer, so I'm not in the medical field. I'm not a computer vision engineer, but I think taking a UX user experience type of view from this is really going to push augmented reality forward. So my hope today is to share some of those new experiences. And the first thing, I obviously want to thank Nasir. I want to thank Dr. Farshad and the Balgrist for hosting this event and really continuing to push the advancement of these surgical innovations forward. There's so many talented people that I met during these types of events and the networking that we created that I'm confident that we're going to help surgeons treat their patients better with augmented reality. So while I'm spearheading the medical augmented reality design for Arthrex, the program's really directed and championed by Dr. Larry Higgins and our VP of strategic. He's our VP of strategic development, and he's our lead surgeon and shoulder arthroplasty surgeon. And Ricardo Albertorio is our VP of engineering as well. And I met Nasir back in 2017 when I saw a TED Talk that he put together about augmenting human capacity. And when I saw that TED Talk, I knew right away I had to meet Nasir. He just seemed to get it. He knew it wasn't just about novelty. It was about really extending our capabilities as human beings and making those things valuable. And when I went to meet him at Johns Hopkins, that's when he introduced me to Matthias Umbraff, who is really an incredible talent. And I got a chance to meet his arcade research team at Johns Hopkins, and that really kickstarted our collaborative efforts. And he connected me to Wenhao, who's a PhD candidate at Johns Hopkins, and he's currently a PhD student that we're sponsoring. And we really have the pleasure of working with him. And it was good to have you on site a little bit, Wenhao, so you can be here firsthand. So I did attend the event a couple of years ago, and I really left very well informed, inspired, and motivated to bring augmented reality surgical guidance to orthopedics. You can see me, I'm right there. I really wish I could have been there in person this year. There's so much going on, Rundfunk and all the different energy and buzz of that place was really overwhelmingly amazing. And I really want to make sure I attend more often. Unfortunately, COVID had other plans. But to give a little bit of background on myself, which I don't typically like to do, but I have a bachelor's and master's in engineering, bachelor's in electrical, my master's is in industrial engineering. And really my dream coming out of school was not to work on electronics because I knew technology evolves, right? Things become obsolete and languages change, programming languages change. So I wanted to work in video games. So that was kind of like a dream job. I got to work at EA Sports and work on John Madden football and NCAA football. But after a while, I wanted to work in motion capture. So I found a way to use a biomechanics research lab at the University of Miami that had a Vicon motion system. So I got really comfortable and I got certified trained with Vicon motion systems. So the idea of reflective based marker tracking and motion systems, force plate analysis, and really biomechanical analysis is something that I really have a good foundation in. And I was going to bring that to Art Institute as well and teach that type of animation using mocap. Then with 2008 being the stock market crash, I ended up needing to shift a few things, and I ended up at an ad agency called Grupo Uno that served some really big companies in Latin America. And one in particular was Porsche. And the reason I mentioned Porsche is because we created a campaign around augmented reality. So it was called The Fourth Dimension. And that was back in 2000, I think 10. And we had, printed cards with a big marker on it. And we used that image-based marker to showcase the Panamera for launch in Latin America. So you were able to use the webcam. So when I see some of these augmented reality solutions today, it's kind of hard to get really excited about it because the technology has really been around for a long time. And you can see some of these other systems that were mentioned that have been around for a long time. So after that experience, I ended up going to a UX consultancy where I started to work with GE Healthcare and UPMC Enterprises and really get embedded into medical device design. And that's where I started to work on breast mammography interfaces for GE. And I got to really start getting embedded in radiological systems. And that's where I started to do additional training into kind of human factors and all the ISO standards. So I'm very proficient in those types of standards. So when I come with these new designs and new technology, I'm really trying to push for ensuring usability best practices are in place. And that's when I joined Arthrex. And at Arthrex, I added a couple more certifications to my belt with some design thinking certification from MIT and some disruptive strategy certifications with Clayton Christensen's program. And I feel like given this wealth of knowledge and the various backgrounds that I've had and experiences, I feel like I can really help augmented reality move forward. So outside of medical augmented reality, I wanted to show a little bit of the work that I do as a principal UX designer at Arthrex. I primarily work, can everybody hear the audio? The audio, does that work? Thumbs up, thumbs down.
I think it doesn't work. Maybe you have to share again and stop the screen sharing and then share again and tick the box on the left bottom side.
Okay. I remember we did this before. Oh, you're right. Okay. Thanks, Matthias. Okay, can you see my screen now?
Yes.
kind of an epic song, but really what I wanted to show there was that I'm responsible for the designs of essentially a surgical suite of solutions, right? Everything that's in the operating room, imaging systems, including the new nano arthroscopy system that we have. I designed all of those systems. And I did want to share a brief video on Reinhold, our CEO and president, as well as give a little bit of background on what our resources here at Arthrex are.
For orthopedic surgeons, this place is a nexus of what's new. Arthrex headquarters, Naples, Florida. On any given day, dozens of them are here on a pilgrimage, learning the finer points of their craft, using the latest Arthrex innovations in surgical devices and implants. There's a lot to try.
We're going to use the shaver just to clean things up a little bit.
This active incubator of innovation creates at least 1,000 new products every year.
Actually, it was 2,000 last year. Our minimum expectation is 1,000 new products a year.
Wow, that's quite a pace. I sat down with the founder and president, Reinhold Schmieding, for a rare interview. How do you maintain that?
Well, you have a lot of creative people, and you give them the resources, you give them the autonomy to make decisions.
With 6,000 employees all over the world and nearly $3 billion a year in revenue, Arthrex is a fast-moving pioneer in this arena. It's a privately held company with a focus on the unique mission of helping surgeons treat their patients better.
Economic gain was something I was never really interested in, and that's my one piece of advice for those that are developing a product or starting a company. Follow a passion, do things for the right reason. If you do it for economic gain, you probably won't be successful.
Reinhold Schmieding was born in the Detroit area to German immigrant parents, both physicians. He studied pre-med at Michigan State, but in his senior year, he went to a career fair that changed his life.
I saw this little exhibit of orthopedic implants, and I stared at that table and it was love at first sight.
So he took a job working for a medical devices firm in Munich.
I was in surgery every day helping surgeons, and it was absolutely the most rewarding thing I could imagine doing, and I was very good at it.
At the time, surgeons had just begun using arthroscopic tools to peer inside the body without making an incision.
So this is the original arthroscope.
But surgeons used it strictly as a diagnostic tool.
They asked me, Reinhold, I can see the meniscus, arthroscopically. If I just had some little instruments, I could do this arthroscopically. And at that moment, I just knew I was the right place at the right time.
Reinhold Schmieding is an inventor who approaches his craft much as Thomas Edison did, by inspiring and leading a tenacious team.
It takes a team to accomplish something like innovation and medical devices at the same pace that we've done for the last 40 years, so it's all about the team, really, and I'm just one of the team players.
With equal parts curiosity, creativity, and persistence, Reinhold Schmieding has turned his dreams into innovations that have changed the world. It's what great inventors do, and it's all in a day's work here at this nexus of what's new.
All right. Well, so Reinhold charted me with this opportunity. Really happy that I have this chance. And with regards to innovation and studying innovation in enterprises, I really came to the understanding that having a deep sense of empathy is really where you're going to find the best sources of innovation. So when I think about enterprise innovation, I think of design thinking, and I want to talk about some of the dimensions or challenges that really make innovation successful. So first is it being, really part of a real need. Is it a real customer need? Who are your customers? How do your customers demonstrate these problems that you're solving for? Why are they willing to pay someone to solve these problems? Is it technically feasible, right? What's the concept? How will the product service or solve the need? How does the solution compare to alternatives? How does it address the unmet or latent needs that the competition doesn't? And is it worth it, right? It needs to be financially viable. So, what's the cost to deliver it? What's the margin needed? What's the size of the market? Those are all things that need to be considered when we think about innovation. And from the UX side of things, I use design thinking to really help clarify my UX design process. So we always start with some kind of mission statement. What's the problem we're trying to solve? What's the job to be done that we're looking to help our customers do? And from there, we want to do some ethnographic research, some user experience research to really identify those customer needs. And then that can lead into the target specifications. We may not know exactly what's needed, but at least we can establish some relative understandings of what those specifications might be, so we can generate some product concepts. And from those product concepts, you can do experimentation, and you can start to down select those concepts and test them. And then once we do all the testing and we learn, we can set some final specifications. We can plan the eventual development that we want to pursue. And then that's where we have our final development plan. And I'm glad to hear some of the usability discussion and talk about ergonomics and form factor and workflow. Those things are absolutely critical. And I really think that's where the innovation is. Innovation in how you can really optimize a workflow. So when we think about the workflow optimization, we want to first do this user research. And all of these things are kind of founded in the FDA guidance, in the design controls 62366 guidance. So if you're looking for a mechanism that's going to be reproducible and systematic and helping you define these requirements, that's a great place to start, is doing the 62366 training. So from there, we do some risk analyses and some user needs and requirements evaluation. So we do things like task analysis or PCA analysis, which is perception, cognition, action analysis. And we create a use-related risk assessment so that we know exactly all the potential use-related risks that are introduced in the system. And we want to try to mitigate whatever we can with our designs, right? There are preventative measures, there are informative measures, there are a lot of different ways that we can mitigate risk and we can ensure optimal performance. So we can develop a usability evaluation plan, and then we get into formative evaluations. And formative evaluations are meant to be nimble, and they're meant to really help development teams move quickly to iterate. So it's not meant to be expensive. The FDA doesn't want us to be burdened by these evaluations because they can be really costly, right? Surgeons' times and clinicians' times are expensive. So the way you get around that is by doing low cost, really quick turnaround time evaluations, which are called formative evaluations. And then you have those summative evaluations that are really cumulative, that look at the entire system. And that's where you have to really use some research rigor and have a good sample size that can at least get 99% of the potential use error. So when we look at what my charter is for augmented reality, I'm really focused in total shoulder arthroplasty. And when we look at why this is important, we look at the complications of total shoulder arthroplasty. And this came from a talk that Larry Higgins gave. 40% of component loosening in total shoulder arthroplasty was due to misalignment. And of that 40%, 83% were the glenoid component misalignment. So there's a really big opportunity there. And so that's where our particular initiative right now that I'm going to be sharing today is focused on that glenoid component alignment. And when we talk about alignment and we talk about the parameters of alignment, right? This is the glenoid surface. We think about the desired path, and that typically comes from the planning portion of this. But then when we look at the actual drilled pathway, we can see kind of like a delta, right? The delta of the insertion point, which I denote here as P, and we measure in millimeters. And the theta here refers to the orientation or the inclination inversion difference between the desired path and the actual drill path. So Arthrex has taken a lot of great strides to evolve the patient-specific transfer solution. So if we look at this example here, you see the box is really what we call the strike zone. So if you look at just the CT and then you do it freehand in the surgery, in this example of 50 targets that are here, we see that there's only one strike out of 50, so roughly 2% in the strike zone. And when you add 3D planning, you get 5 strikes or 10% in the strike zone. But with Arthrex's 3D and 5D targeter, we get 40 strikes. So that's 80% in the strike zone. So it's really a dramatic improvement. And fortunately for Arthrex, we have a predicate device that transfers a preoperative plan onto the patient. And it's a physical backup that we can leverage, that Arthrex can leverage. We have this ability to do this. And because we have this, this gold standard that we know works, we can start to see if augmented reality can match our existing system. But not only that, what I think is even more important is that we have a fail-safe, right? And let's say our head-mounted display, all these other technologies, they fail us in the operating room or power goes out, whatever happens. We have a fail-safe. We have a way to transfer a preoperative plan to a patient no matter what, regardless of any potential risk of our augmented reality system. And I think that's really important. So when we look at Arthrex's virtual implant positioning system, this is kind of the output that you see from the preoperative planning. And so this is a little video just to show you kind of the planning process. So we know that Arthrex VIP and the 5D calibrator work really well. Right? The error that we're getting from that is less than 2 millimeters of translational error and less than 2 degrees of rotational error. And that's a really tough order for augmented reality, given everything I've seen historically with these systems. Even you know, Microsoft coming straight out and saying that the registration of their system doesn't support those types of things. But we believe that there are opportunities to reach this plateau, to exceed this plateau of error. And we see the opportunities that are coming with the evolution of image-based guidance systems in autonomous vehicles, but also in the best practices in user experience design. That's really what I think is going to differentiate these systems. So the big question is, how accurately can we place a guide wire using mixed reality? So I won't spend too much time on this, but I think selecting the modality is important. And while there are lots of different means of doing this, there's pass-through, there's just, you know, heads-up display type augmented reality. We chose mixed reality. I think we're not as interested in merged reality that have this kind of pass-through, because I think it introduces new potential risks if the system goes down. So that's where we think the HoloLens is a really good choice. So our first effort, collaborative effort in publication with Johns Hopkins and the Arcade Group, we ended up winning an outstanding paper award, but our experiment was on end-to-end pin placement accuracy with different AR visualization strategies. So we looked at 4 different methods under 2 different occlusion scenarios. We looked at 8 different 3D glenoid models, 5 different paths for each person to fire. And we looked at, we had those users drill paths through a CVCT scanned and printed glenoid model. So the first method we evaluated was just pure visualization. And that's where you place this kind of virtual object next to the real anatomy. And so here you can see Wenhao at work, creating this kind of virtual placement where he's going to find the trajectory. And this was using the HoloLens 1. And there's certainly plenty of similarities, but there's some very clear differences between the HoloLens 1 and HoloLens 2. But here he's just using that as kind of like a reference guide. And the second method that we evaluated was outside-in tracking. And this one I've seen quite a lot of, right? This is probably the most common one that's out there. We've taken a different approach, and we're not going for these kind of reflective marker-based systems. With my experience in motion capture using these specific systems, I feel like there's specific error that comes in placement. There's also additional costs, there's additional procedure time, there's a significant amount of calibration that needs to happen. And there's occlusion that needs to happen. But most of the drill guidance and things like that are tracking drills. It also adds a footprint in the OR. So there's a lot of reasons to try to move away from this kind of outside-in tracking mechanism. So we use this outside-in tracking mechanism without occlusion just to evaluate it. And we also did it with occlusions to see what the differences are. So here you can see the outside-in mechanism, which performs really well, right? Like when you can see all those markers, it does a pretty good job. And obviously this is showing some offset that is just inherent in the HoloLens 1. So it looks like it may not be overlaid, but it is overlaid effectively. And the third method was inside out with freehand drilling. So inside out being just overlaying digital guidance and having someone just freehand try to match their drill with a virtual object. And we found that to be quite difficult, right? So we did this with no occlusion, we did it with occlusion. And when we looked at this example, we saw something interesting. We saw that when you look at it from the front side, the registration overlay looks good, right? Even from the side, but from a certain angle, we started to see this offset. So we started to learn that there was an offset related to depth estimation. So in doing this, in identifying that issue, we started to use another method that would counter this offset. And that was by taking 2 different views. So then you get your resultant approximated position from the resulting 2 views. So in the fourth method, we looked at inside out tracking, but with a track drill, right? So once you have this kind of virtual plan, matching the physical object to a virtual plan, just from a human perspective or perception standpoint, it's really challenging. So we felt like we needed to visualize the drill path a little bit better. And that's what you'll see here. So pure visualization is able to tell the user the insertion point at fairly good accuracy by identifying the geometric properties of the glenoid. However, the orientation of the path isn't as intuitive to tell. And these numbers, mind you, are from a very low end. So take them with a grain of salt. There's a lot more to be done in terms of getting more data here. Outside-in tracking did the best, of course, but it's also less accurate than the track drill accuracy because the user's not able to align the real drill with the virtual path perfectly in reality. So the inside-out registration with occlusion was the worst because it's not really able to register well with the model once all the key features are occluded. So the track drill can really help increase the alignment between the reality and the drill in the same setup. So the key finding that we had was that there was this depth sensory error, and the depth estimation is dependent on the materials and the reflectance of the object. And in a surgical environment, that can be really challenging. So we learned that there was always this kind of miscue in terms of where the reconstructed position was versus where the actual position was. So in our second paper that we recently submitted, we use a different type of calibration-free workflow. And we're doing this with the HoloLens 2. We have a Tremano arm. The Tremano arm is used, it's part of an Arthrex patient bed, and the arm is often used for capturing images in open procedures. So we can fix the stereo camera to that. And that's what we're using here is a stereo vision camera. So in this paper, we present a mixed reality navigation workflow that primarily addresses the challenges that result from the interference between the time of flight cameras and the environment that prevent the accurate image-based registration. We target the drift of the mixed reality environment due to the SLAM-based tracking, and we address the perspective ambiguity of the human perception of that depth. So to combat the depth uncertainty of the time of flight camera, we chose to use an invisible stereo camera, or the Z Mini, and a transformer model STTR to reconstruct the 3D space. Now, this is all Wenhao. I'm not a computer vision engineer, so I'll try to answer as many questions as I can about this technology. I have Wenhao on the line in case there are any technical questions about this. But here you can see the phantom under the surgical light captured with manual exposure. And if we used auto exposure, the region of interest would be like completely overexposed. Like it would be washed out. You wouldn't see any of the features. And traditional 3D reconstruction from stereo images relies on scene texture for feature matching. So the surgical scene is not always full of textures. So we have to use a stereo transformer model proposed by Lee et al. For the stereo reconstruction. And here you can see that example at the bottom. So from an experimental setup perspective, we have our HoloLens 2, we have our drill, we have our VIP targeter, which is really kind of just guiding the drill pin, because placing this pin, this is a bendable pin as well. So we need some assistance to place the pin once we know where we want to put it. So we have our stereo camera, and that does it's a image marker based tracking of just that camera. And it performs the surface reconstruction with some stability, and then it gives us our target trajectory. So for drill tracking, we're using this Euphoria slide-on image marker, which will be improved in later builds. It's really just for prototyping purposes. And our approach really differs from some of the other drill mounted markers, like the one explored by Lande et al., as their approach requires repeated recalibration of the markers to the drill and 6 degrees of freedom tracking. But since the marker on the drill in our setup is only needed to inform the user of the angular error, it only needs to be tracked in 3 degrees of freedom. So you can place the pin essentially on the translational point, the insertion point, and then we're now only focused on pivoting and using dialing in the angular alignment. So comparison of the end-to-end accuracy between the 3 methods, the translational error P being our ground truth and the rotational error of the drilled trajectory from the ground truth. For the VIP patient-specific guide, each user only drilled 1 trajectory on the Phantom because of the patient-specific nature of the instrument. But essentially, we're looking at some really decent performance measures here, right? Like we're looking at 3.5 millimeters, but we know we can extend this further. And I think the user experience design of some of these techniques is going to really help bring this down to our gold standard of 2 millimeters and 2 degrees of error. So in conclusion, our recent research addressed some really key augmented reality challenges, right? The depth sensory, the human perception. I don't know if anyone can tell me what this interface is, maybe the most famous user interface ever. And then drift. And I couldn't find a good example of showing the drift in AR. So I figured that would get the point across, but that's where you get that kind of shift in the registration overlay. So our future work is really going to involve more cadaveric testing, more iteration, right? We want to rapidly iterate through these things. We want to learn as much as we can cheaply and effectively. And Arthrex is really fortunate that we have one of the biggest medical education facilities in the world. We have a big wet lab here where we can do cadaveric testing, but we also have the ability to 3D print our own like sawbones and patient-specific anatomy. So we can work with pathological and anatomical models. So that's really it. I want to give a special thanks to Dr. Higgins and Ricardo for their direction in this effort. Our extended Arthrex team also deserves some credit. So that's Bert Brack is a product manager in Germany, and he was previously with BrainLab, and he contributed to our accuracy validation methodology. And Chad Jazewski, who was previously part of the HoloLens team, is now our lead augmented reality and virtual reality engineer. And Cohen Wijsdix, who helped really crystallize this research partnership between Johns Hopkins and Arthrex, and he really continues to provide evidence-based guidance and support for our initiatives. And lastly, the extended Johns Hopkins team and the Arcade team, I know all those researchers talk, and that's really why Arthrex believes this to be an important collaboration with universities, and we hope to extend those networking opportunities to other universities and other hospitals so that we can do more of this type of work. That's it. Any questions?
Thank you very much for the interesting talk. As always, we accept questions in the chat, and I will forward them to Jonathan in the meantime.
Sure.
Jonathan has a question.
Thanks a lot, Jonathan. This was a great talk, and we are really happy to interact with you. Before Ray asks his question, I have one question here. You talked about arthroscopy at the very beginning. And I don't know if you saw the talk of Alex Johnson, who was also excited about arthroscopy. What would you see as AR for arthroscopy that you would need, or that you would see that would complement your products? If you can share it, whatever you can share.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I would say that Alex is the right one to provide the use cases, right? That's what I think is most important, is hearing directly from surgeons as to how it's going to improve their workflow. And once we understand how we can improve the workflow with AR, that's really where the opportunity lives. So the question I would have is, how are you going to use augmented reality to either make yourself more efficient in that procedure, to reduce the time in the procedure, to improve accuracy, reduce the time the patient's under, all those things. I think that's where we would look and harvest those use cases. So I definitely need to talk to Alex or Dr. Johnson after this talk.
Thanks again, and thanks for accepting to support and mentor, because answers some of the questions of one of the teams. Thank you very much.
Pleasure.
Ray has a question.
Yeah. Oh, maybe I have a microphone here. I don't know if you've got camera on me or not, but
Yes.
oh, is there? Okay. Jonathan, that was a really super talk. I especially appreciate the care that you and your company take to the design iterations, the task analysis, perception, cognition, and action. This is actually, you stole a lot of stuff from tomorrow's talk that I'll be giving. So, but that's.
I remembered your talk, by the way. The last time I was there, objective evaluations. What are the objective measures? Excellent talk, and I carried it.
What a great.
Thank you.
What a great audience. Well, that's super. Okay, so then I guess the only question that I have is you take great care to perform experiments where your results are generally in terms of accuracy, really nice accuracy results. Do you consider also the task time, the speed?
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah. I would say that we need to get to a point where it's a realistic use environment and really try to simulate the environment as much as possible, right? Because when it's in the lab, it's great. It can work wonders, but you got to bring it into the operating room. You got to really try and embed yourself and be in the fishbowl, right? If you're in the fishbowl, then you're going to start to learn all those different things and all those little bits and pieces that are going to complicate things and make augmented reality something that can't be adopted, right? So those are the really critical aspects that are going to help bring the product to life and bring it to the market, are making sure that it really works within that surgical environment.
Super stuff. Thanks. Probably there's more questions in the chat.
Thank you very much. So far, no questions in the chat. Maybe I can ask a technical question in the meantime.
Sure.
About that stereo network that you used, of course. What was the purpose of that? So you used this instead of the off-the-shelf reconstruction of the Set Mini. Is that right?
Mm-hmm. Yes. Okay.
Because the performance is increasing.
So what we did was use that for the purpose of kind of I guess it's the localization, right? We needed a new localization paradigm and something that would better understand the environmental movement, right? So how are we gonna, we can't have someone just stand still focused on an area. So we know there's gonna be some movement in the head. So how do we account for that? How do we account for the short throw time of flight and the wider environment? So we needed something that had multi-view as well as just the point cloud that's on the HoloLens. Maybe Wenhao can speak to that in a bit more detail, but that's from my understanding.
Actually, we have tested both the off-shelf reconstruction and the transformer, and in the surgical scenario, we find the transformer works much better than off-the-shelf reconstruction from the Z-Mini.
Yeah, that is very interesting, I think. And if it,
thanks, Wenhao.
The quality,
yeah, because it's mainly because of the texture issue.
How the quality of the final reconstruction is with the transformer network. So thank you very much. I think there's no more questions in the chat. So thank you very much for the talk.
Pleasure.
Thanks
and I will
again.
close
Great
to-
talk, great intervention. Thank you.
So I close today's session with this. Tomorrow will be the final keynotes, the final day of keynotes in this year's summer school. We will have industry keynote by Augmented, followed by research keynotes or clinical keynote by Professor de Ribaud-Pierre and research keynote by Professor Eagleson. And then we close it off with a panel discussion about AR validation. So we're looking forward to see you again tomorrow in the call, and have a good night, day, night, morning. See you tomorrow. Thank you very much.
Thank you.